Okay.
We got the squad here.
Hey.
Hello. How do I do a
Host a live? Oh, we got 10 people. What's up, Madtown? And surrounding.
Hey.
Oh, sorry, watch party. There we go.
Let me do that. So.
And then afterwards, of course, you know, you guys can share the video.
Okay.
We'll just wait a few more minutes. And if anyone who is joining us now, please feel free to leave us a comment, any questions you might have, or topics you'd like us to talk about. By all means, share at the bottom. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. Can you guys see your peoples watching yet? Shout them out. Hey.
Oh, I'm just gonna look at my phone.
Right? I know. I'm like,
because I tried to do it for my computer and it's not working.
It's different when you do it like desktop and your phone. It's like different, but yes. Ooh, we got quite a few people starting right now. Oh, we got a heart.
All right.
Yes, yes. All right, you guys. Well, welcome, everyone. Welcome to Wisconsin Mujeres, LatinX TalkBack, Anti-Blackness in our community. And just real quick, just intro to Wisconsin Mujeres. We cover Mujeres' real-life stories, testimonies of healing from generational oppression as Latinas. You know, we don't want to go there, but we got to talk about it. And if you're a Latina who's the first, second, or even an immigrant and you have a story about your family's survival of oppression or abuse and you're ready to share, please contact us at Midwest Mujeres Broadcast and share widely. So for today's topic, we kind of are going to go over a little bit of COVID-19, how and why it affects brown and black communities, politics of division, funding, stereotypes, and realities. So thank you so much for joining us. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce the list of panels that we have today joining us. First, we have David Muhammed. How are you, David?
I'm good. Can everybody hear me okay? Can y'all hear me all right? Okay, I'm doing well. Just happy to be here. Shout out to MaDee. Shout out to Araceli for hosting tonight. Joe and Megan being here. Looking forward to the conversation. And for those that don't know me, my name is David Muhammed. I work heavily in the community. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin originally, but I've been in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on and off since the early 90s and most of my life. And work in the human service and violence prevention field there, where I'm also active at Muhammad Mosque No. 3, working in the community.
Joe, what's up?
All right. Hey, Joe Maldonado. I'm actually reverse journey as David. I was born and raised in the Mill, and I came to Madison for college, and I've been here about 19 years. I live in Fitchburg. I'm actually in Alder. There, just got elected to the city council a couple months ago. Let's go. I work with, my whole career has been working with within education in some way, from the babies all the way up to grown folks. I'm currently work for the University of Wisconsin Extension, where I'm in charge of community and youth development for the whole state.
Wow. And Megan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So I'm Megan Diaz-Ricks. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am currently the Director of Economic Development at Commonwealth Development. Commonwealth Development is a community development organization. We do adult workforce development programs, youth workforce development programs. We also do housing development, and we have small business incubators. So I oversee the small business incubators for up to 30, sometimes 40, 50 businesses at a time. And then our adult and youth workforce development programs. And I identify as Chicana. Both of my parents were Chicano migrant farm workers, both here in Wisconsin. And they migrated around the country, California, Texas. My mom is a Tejana, so I love Selena. So I'll probably find a way to slip Selena in here somewhere. I don't know. But yeah, so that's me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And myself, my name is MaDee Lopez. I am the morning show producer for Still the Morning Rush on 93.1 Jams. I'm also a content manager for Wisconsin Mujeres. So welcome, everyone. And thank you guys so much for joining me and being a part of this talkback. So real quick, we did want to start off with a written poem, just real short. Let's see. So we are going to just go ahead and actually take a moment of silence, just real quick for, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony Robinson, and all the thousands of Black lives that have been robbed from us in the last hundreds of years, really, due to white supremacy, police brutality, and institutionalized racism. So just a moment of silence, and then. So thank you very much for that moment of silence, you guys. And so just real quick, we're just going to define what anti-Blackness is, and then we can go from there on different topics and different things that we can go into. So just real quick, there are many reasons that Blacks and Latinos are intricately linked. However, they're also culprit in systems of Black oppression. Despite our proximity to Black people and the Afro-Latinos in our families, internalized and the racism runs deep in the Latino community. Anti-Blackness is ingrained in our community, and it's also something that is often swept under the rug. We have a long way to break down hundreds of years of white supremacy, but as Latinos, refuse to be active in the Black liberation movement is to deny ourselves as Latinos as an ally that is necessary but not mandatory in the fight for our collective freedom, for immigration reform and community justice. So with that, if you guys want to start off, just, kind of letting us know how you feel as though, why there's such a disconnect between Blacks and Latinos. If anyone had any personal stories or situations that may have occurred in which, you felt like you had to defend, obviously, your friends of color in situations, and may even feel uncomfortable at the same time because it's like, hey, it's not even really my fight. So why bother,
Yeah.
I can get involved.
Yeah, I can kind of start. So something that I saw on Facebook the other day that was shared by many of my family members and just folks that I know. And I didn't know at the time how to just confront them about it, but there was a video and it said the caption of it, and then in big letters across the screen it said Latino lives matter too. And so the entire video was just instances where mainly Black folks were committing acts of violence against Latinos. And so it was like a Latino man who was like a paletero, and he was being robbed by two young Black men. And it was just like, it was extremely, extremely anti-Black. And I was like, why are y'all sharing this? Like, what, you know? And they feel as though they have to take themselves away from, you know, this movement, Black Lives Matter, and saying that, you know, they feel as though we are not highlighting that Latino lives matter, which completely takes out Afro-Latinos from the equation too. And so there's that binary that you create, that there's Latinos and there's Black folks. And then where is the, you know, where are Afro-Latinos in the mix? But also it was, you know, saying that, trying to make a point by showing a video where you're trying to portray Black folks as violent against Latinos was extremely racist and extremely anti-Black. And so I'm just trying to, you know, have conversations with my family, like, that is not, you know, this movement does not mean that your life is not important, or, you know, Latinos are not experiencing violence, but you trying to say that Black folks are violent against Latinos, and that this movement is, I guess, inherently violent in a way, is extremely anti-Black. And so I think that, you know, being someone who is Chicana, you know, there's a huge history there with folks who try to create as close of a proximity to whiteness as possible. And so, you know, a lot of Chicanos, we have, you know, I just read something where, you know, the term like Viva la Raza and La Raza is very, very anti-Black. You know, that was like a very kind of like almost a white supremacist undertone to that term, when you say like the Raza is more close to whiteness than Black, right? Like you want to keep your Raza as like brown people, right? And like mestizaje, and you know, people who are more brown than Black, right? And so it was really interesting reading all of that and trying to unpack that in my own identity. But for me, I think anti-Blackness personally shows up when, you know, a lot of my family, when there's, you know, trying to talk about how we are closer to brown and white, and, you know, being anti-Black against Black folks because we have a long history here, right? So like African, you know, talking about Black folks and saying, you know, racist stuff about Black folks and trying to separate yourselves from Black folks. You know, I've heard that my whole life. And, you know, saying that, you know, really, really anti-Black things amongst each other, and, you know, not ever wanting to own up that that is racist and anti-Black. So I guess for me, that kind of like, I didn't know how to confront that, you know, growing up. It was just something where you're like, oh, okay, you know, my family is really, you know, they don't like Black folks. So, but, you know, as you learn about the history, it's kind of like, you know, you have to be able to confront that and say, well, how can I, you know, talk about anti-Blackness with them, right? So for me, it kind of starts with my own family and people who are close to me, I guess. My long-winded answer.
That's awesome. No, you actually brought up a lot of things, and a lot of things you were saying. I didn't want to interrupt you, but would you say then that, like, in Latino household or even in the Latino culture, that racism just is there?
Yeah, but yeah, and David, definitely go ahead. But
Well, I think it's important to recognize that the foundation of this, I would say, the meeting of the indigenous people of this hemisphere and the kidnap of Africans from the African continent with Caucasian people, it started with the foundational idea being white supremacy. And it's at the root of every system. And, you know, I know that we're talking about it being present in our families, but if it was present in our families, that's because our families were indoctrinated with it. And when you look at how we got to become Latino to begin with, Latino is not necessarily a term that elevates our indigenous ancestry or our African ancestry. It actually practices a form of erasure of it under the guise of Latinidad, that because we speak Spanish, we have a pan-Latino identity, where you and I all have a different experience, maybe in our different countries, or we have a different experience based on our skin tone. I think it's important for us to know that there's a narrative being advanced that Latinos are somehow more anti-Black than other ethnic groups, and that there's a great deal of tension because there's something inherent in our culture. But what's inherent is not our culture. What's inherent is that white supremacy is our experience in this hemisphere as well. And so it was illegal to affirm Blackness. And social mobility in a society, meaning your ability to advance economically, culturally, who you can marry, if you can own land, even down to religion, it really starts there. Because in the Catholic Church, Black people, Africans, were not considered as worthy of salvation. But the indigenous people, they were kind of like a question mark. Mm-hmm. And so they allowed them to be converted into Christianity, but the grade of their social mobility was based upon how much white blood they had. So if we have terms like mejorar la raza, to improve the race, or you know, even down to who can own land and things like that, that becomes ingrained in how we treat each other and how we teach our children. And even down to the most minute thing. How many of us have heard, because colorism is big for us. No tardas mucho en el sol, pa que no oscures, you know, pelo malo and all this other stuff. And even my color, I was taught from a very early age, you know, I was raised knowing that Black lives matter and that the Blackness in me mattered. And my father and mother both taught me that history. But in the Caribbean, you hear that same language, pelo malo, words like prieto, the form of expression when someone uses the word negro is like the insult is the word negro, and then the word that describes it comes after it. Mm-hmm. Este negro de mala sangre, you know, maldito negro. All types of terminology that ascribes a negative aspect to Blackness. And most of that came about because of the need for social control of the indigenous people and the enslaved Africans in this continent. But, you know, when you look at our history, see, the most important thing, if I could say tonight, and that I want to get across, is that the basis of Black and brown unity is not political. So while we're fighting for Black Lives Matter, and when we're fighting for immigrant rights, if we're allowing the electoral cycle to be what forces us to get up and do something about it, then we've already missed the boat. It's not a 4-year, 2-year type thing. We are family of each other as the indigenous people, as the Aboriginal people of the earth. And we had to be taught something to make us hate each other so that we could be controlled by the same enemy. And the same thing is happening today. And for our family that's from Texas, when we look at the Texas history, the Alamo was a war over whiteness. It was a war over the expansion of slave territories because Black people sought refuge in Mexico and were able to escape there. When you even look at some of the history of our quote unquote civil rights organizations, LULAC's first victory in school desegregation wasn't so that brown children could be accepted in schools. It was so that brown children could be classified as white, so that they wouldn't fall under the same the segregation laws that affected Black people. So we have to own up to the fact that we have been indoctrinated and accepted the idea that closeness or proximity to whiteness is closeness to God. Right. And that closeness to Black people is like even down to the terms un salto atrás, like un atraso, like we're taking steps backwards. So when we come into the American dynamic, we fall in line with their stereotypes about Black people. And the last point I'm gonna make on this is like this. In America, if you got one drop of Black, you're considered black. In Latin America, if you have one drop of white, you're considered not black or not Indian. And so whiteness in Latin America allowed us to deceive ourselves and think we were closer to our oppressor rather than close to each other. And this is the generation that ends all of that.
Yeah, let me jump in on that to give maybe like a real life example that'll that's kind of close to us. So I'll just share like what my ancestry is to kind of help contextualize. My mother is second generation Puerto Rican, born and raised in Milwaukee. So is my stepdad. But my biological father is Jewish, from New York. And if you see me, I could look like anything. You don't really know what I am, but my mother's my mother's father, physically, like I've seen a picture of him, he looks like Dave, right? So, brown skin, like clearly not white, clearly some African features. And, the story I always heard from my grandmother is that, he came from another town to Utuado, and Utuado's a city right in the middle of the island. It's sort of usually seen like phenotypically as a white, like where more white Puerto Ricans live. His name was Juan. So Juan married his wife, who was of sort of Spanish ancestry, looked very white, had 13 children, including my grandfather. Juan made sure that none of his daughters ever brought home anybody that was dark-skinned. My grandfather had the same rule when he moved to Milwaukee for his two daughters. If you bring somebody home that's black, you're excommunicated from this family. My mother's mother was an orphan. She was orphaned when she was really young. And her father was also somebody that was more brown skinned than other folks in the town. When the other kids found out that my grandmother, that was her biological father, they used to make fun of her. Oh, eso es tu papá el negro. And it made her, like, it traumatized her. So on both sides of my mother's lineage, like, they were trained and indoctrinated to hate that part of themselves. That's not like an atypical story. Like, that happens all the time. And I mean, I'm just jumping back on Dave's point. It's colonialism. It's psychologically damaging you to so much extent that carries along for generations and generations and generations.
But how do we stop that? Like, how do we, if we now know that this is what's happening and what's happened to us and what we're experiencing and what we're suffering from, then, how is it that we break away from that, from these generational curses and oppression, or can we? Or is it just ingrained in our culture, in our brains, in our identities?
So I mean, for me, it's two things. Like, one, it's like knowing those stories and understanding them and understanding why they happen and being able to tie them back to the sort of broader history that David was talking about. Like, when I actually met Dave when I was a freshman in college, and we both pledged a historically African American fraternity. And, Dave was the one that really sort of like led me to a lot of that knowledge and a lot of that history. A lot of it I read for myself. I, learned about the history of Puerto Rico. I learned about how women were sterilized, especially Black Puerto Rican women. I learned about, the history of Puerto Rico being a colony of the United States. And then I started to tie that back into those family stories and started to dig deeper and dig deeper and dig deeper. The other thing that I had to do is just realize, like, I've got certain privileges because of my complexion, and I can't run away from that. Right. But I also have to, at every step of the way, have those critical conversations with people who maybe share the same culture as me, to be able to say, like, look, this is the truth. Like this is why this happens. I can be kind and gentle often. I can also be fierce on occasion, but like it's sort of bringing folks along and constantly exploring, and also exploring like who I am, like knowing that I've always got like stuff I got to work on too, and unlearning all of that stuff. And I mean, I think the other piece is like when you're in rooms where there's power, like saying something, no matter how uncomfortable that is going to be, no matter how much risk you might put yourself at, no matter how much you might lose out on some resources by saying it, like if you get into situations where you gain power to be able to like move things in the room, like you better move things and don't be scared because you want to like maintain a certain relationship. I mean, you can do it gently, you can do it subtly, you can finesse it, but at the same time, you got to be truthful and you always got to speak truth.
But yeah, I think for me, it's like I'm really tired of being told that I have to say things subtly and gently, you know, but it's also because, you know, I was told the other day that, you know, I was like, bro, really? And like somebody told me the other day that if there's ever a Latino leader or if there's ever someone who's in an elected capacity that's Latino, you're never supposed to publicly speak out against them. It doesn't matter what they say or what their bad policy is or, you know, anti-Black, you know, sentiments. It doesn't matter because I am Latino and they are Latino. That means that we have to support each other in order to move our agenda, you know, like the whatever that means forward and you know, in order to move Latinos forward. And I think that is, am I allowed to swear on here? I'm sorry if there's kids watching, but that's bullshit, you know? Like I have always been told that my whole life, that you have to, you know, move quietly, you can't speak out, you have, you know, there's a certain way to do things. And I think that you know, for me, someone who's just like young, trying to come up, trying to be in an elected capacity one day, I don't want to be silenced anymore. And you know, and I'm going to use a lot of my voice and energy towards supporting Black folks, and that's just how it goes. And so I think it's really, I don't know, I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't even know what that means, right? So anyway, yeah.
No, I totally feel you, girl. I totally feel you on that. And I think that for me personally, it was when I was, I don't want to say I was acting ratchet, but, you know, it's when I speak the truth, you know, because when Facebook asks me what's on my mind, I'm going to say what's on my mind. You know what I mean? I'm not going to, like, you know, sugarcoat anything because it is what I feel and what I think, you know, and people definitely will come at you sideways like, oh, why you say that? You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't say this because of this or that and the other. And I just say, boo. Like, I'm going to do what I have to do and say what I have to do in order to, you know, uplift the human race, really, you know, because I don't want oppression or any racism with any race. You know what I mean? And it's funny because a lot of people then, if they see that you're very pro-Black and just, you know, for the Black Lives Matter, that you are just that and not for anyone else. You know what I mean?
MaDee, earlier you asked a question that I think is relevant. You know, we know the root of this, but what is the cure to it? What's the antidote? And I would say for me, it was the knowledge of self. The knowledge of self is you know, from the historical context, and then, you know,
when you say that, though, people.
Go ahead. What's that?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
You started cut off.
Because that's the big.
Oh, my bad.
Sorry.
No. I just, go ahead. I'm working with the technology too. The knowledge of self represents not only my history, but my connection to the Creator. And I do believe that as the original people of the planet, as Black and Indigenous people, we have that, regardless of our mixture, that has happened from our experience, that we're in a unique position because we represent a multinational people, and we represent people with different roots that go to the origin of who we are as humanity. I think it's important to say and acknowledge, for Latinos to acknowledge that you know, all of our ancestry does trace back to those people, to Africa, as well as to our indigenous roots. And so for me, knowledge of self started with studying my history, studying the Black history of Puerto Rico, which is where my family is from, studying the history of Mexico because I grew up mostly around Mexicans. And so what I saw in there, I learned about people like Emiliano Zapata. I learned about the history of the Mexican people as well as the indigenous people of Latin America. But it wouldn't have been I wouldn't have looked into that had I not learned the history of my people, primarily from the inspiration of myself. Personally, it was the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan that got me on that route. And so many of us know the history of Malcolm X and how Malcolm X dropped that last name that was his slave master's name. Well, I wasn't born David Muhammad. Muhammad was the name given to me by my teacher, Minister Farrakhan, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And it represented the body of knowledge of history, of cultural identity, of scripture, of those types of things. But deeper than that, it allowed me to learn, since I learned about myself, it allowed me to learn about other people. And so I came to the table as an equal, not as an inferior. It allowed me to exchange ideas with people who disagreed with me, with people who had different viewpoints. It allowed me to interact in a society that I knew was opposed to me, but I had something on the inside of me that made me to know that I had potential and could accomplish and overcome the barriers and the obstacles of this world. And it showed me that excellence would allow me to overcome the stereotypes that were placed upon me, not by assimilating, not by code switching, not by taming my speech, but by making my point unafraid and fearless, like Megan was talking about. And I think when we shed that fear, some of us, we're conditioned to not make eye contact with figures of authority. And, that was the way I was raised. It was like, no me mires en los ojos when, cuando te están regañando, you know what I'm saying? And so we find ourselves in positions of authority, sitting at tables with people like Joe was talking about, where we have to speak truth to power because we have an entire community of people depending on it. And it's when you have that kind of knowledge, you know that you can't betray your ancestors. And when you move forward like that, it's because you have knowledge of your history and it allows you to make a path for your future.
Absolutely. But then, so what do you say to someone who, okay, you say that we need to educate ourselves, but what do you say to someone who's obviously an older generation or may have had a bad experience with, a fellow Black person? And, how can you change their mind? Because they're to them, they're just like, as Megan mentioned, no, it's Latino matter, lives matter, and that's it. Or
what I would
people, and not with the Black,
Well, and I've heard that too. It's like, cuando se preocupan los negros para nosotros, you hear that kind of talk, right? Y cuando se acordaban de nosotros. I'll put it like this: when you function in your own self-interest, you respect people who function in their own self-interest. And in Milwaukee, for example, there's a great deal, I would say, of political power that the Black community holds that the Latino community doesn't. I'm not saying that they exercise it, but I'm saying that they have it in ways that Latinos don't. Latinos have economic power in this city. There's one, just Cesar Chavez Drive, you got 97 million, I think, around that's generated on that street. The Black community is suffering and does not have that. And they have predatory businesses in their community. And when you come to this country, you're conditioned to kind of see each other through the lens of, oh, this is what I heard about them. They don't work that hard. They're not this, they're not that. And y nosotros hacemos los trabajos que ni los negros hacen, and all that negative kind of talk. A lot of that is social. How do you confront it? You have to confront it with the truth. And to be quite honest, there's a certain generation that is not worth the effort, straight up. It's really on the young people, and it's on the elders with that kind of knowledge to empower them and to support them and lift them up. And I would say to anybody, young or old, that we have to decolonize. And we have to really undo the mental slavery that most of us are poisoned by, which has us looking at each other through the eyes of our enemy rather than through the eyes of our creator.
For sure. Amen to that.
So, I mean, I'm an educator. I'm a developer of humans, and one thing the approach that I always take is to look at things from an asset-based perspective. And I think when we look at the things that we bring to the table, based on those ancestors of ours, those are assets. Like the way that we relate to each other are assets. The way that we care about one another are assets. The way that we break things down, the way that we conceptualize things are assets, but they're often not reflected in like the institutions that we walk in. And what I try to, and what I'm getting at when I say subtle is, I will introduce bit by bit like who I am, and I won't leave my culture at the door. And you're going to see it. You're not going to see it through like, stereotypes. You're going to actually see it through how, I relate to people, and how I conceptualize things, and how I think about people. And I think that's what we also need to do. Like, look at those aspects of our culture that really, have benefit, and structure the way that we do things around them.
For sure. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's see. Well, I mean, it sounds like we're just like kind of just speaking in general, just as far as like what is anti-Blackness, what we can learn from it, and how can we dismantle it and raise awareness, which is really great. So just so anyone who is just now joining us, welcome to Wisconsin Mujeres. This is the Latinx TalkBack, Anti-Blackness in our community. And today we have Megan Diaz, Megan Diaz-Ricks, David Muhammed, and Joe Maldonado here with us, as well as myself, MaDee Lopez, just kind of talking over about our experiences and what we've learned and what we hope that this talkback really can give to people wanting to learn more, or even a space for you guys to really vent and let us know what you'd like to talk about, or what you want to get off your chest. Because this is a time where we're in a space right now where everyone is we're all banded in one now at this point, or at least we're trying to be, so that we could get things moving the way that we want to, or that it needs to be, and not continue what we have been doing, because obviously it's not working, and it hasn't been, and we all know this, and it's wrong. But then how do we dismantle that? I mean, right now it seems like we have a lot of Latinos, or even persons of color in legislative, or in the party. So would you say, Joe, being an Alder for Fitchburg, what are some things that you see or that you hope to achieve in your position to help with, this anti-Blackness and just really trying to come together?
Yeah. So I actually represent a district that's, I think, probably the most, has the highest percentage of people of color in Dane County, by far. My neighborhood in particular. So I live, for anybody that's familiar with Madison and Fitchburg, I live like right off of Verona Road, a little bit south of the Beltline. If anybody knows where like Home Depot, Fast Forward, is, I live over there. So that area is, like that little spot of neighborhood is pretty much closed off by highways on three sides, and a marsh or a lake on the fourth. And it's split between two cities, Madison and Fitchburg. It's split between 3 high schools, 5 middle schools, 6 elementary schools. And for, a long time, there was no access to food close by. There was a lot of gun violence, a few decades back. And I also have part of my district that's a little bit west of Verona Road. And that area also now is sort of shut off in that it doesn't have really close food access, and it doesn't have any businesses in the area, doesn't have a place for youth to go. So my focus, like really in my office, is to move around things. Like I want to move resources into a manner in which our communities are really served and invested in. I'll give you sort of one example. Our police budget is 34% of our total budget. If you combine our human services, our senior center, our economic development department, our healthy neighborhoods grant, you may get a little bit above 7%.
Wow.
And there are folks in our neighborhood that have incredible talent. They have incredible skill sets. They have hopes, dreams, and desires. But oftentimes, if you wanted to say start your own business, the amount of capital that you got to put up front to be able to do that is undoable for most people. If you have kids and you want to send them somewhere after school while you're working, if you live in certain parts of my district, you can't really do that. So I mean, I'm looking at seriously questioning what we spend our money on, because what we spend our money on in many ways reflects what our values are. And I want those institutions that we invest in to be led by the people that live in our neighborhood, not necessarily by somebody that's coming in. I mean, y'all know, like, my wife started a grocery store on the Madison side of our neighborhood, and she wasn't able to really do that unless she had a significant grant, upfront from the city of Madison to be able to make that investment. Folks with generational wealth can easily do that. They can borrow money, they can get money from their family, they can, use lines of credit that work, but we don't necessarily have those opportunities. And again, I know who the people in our community are that have talent, and I also know where the levers are. I'm a connector, so that's my God-given duty, is to make those connections and get out of the way.
Absolutely. Right. That you did mention about defunding the police, and that's actually become like a hot topic. Megan, what do you feel about that? Is that a good thing? I mean, I see the pros and cons to that, but I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, so I'm actually on my abolitionist journey. So I'm doing a lot of just listening, research, trainings, classes around prison abolition, what that even means, how the prison system is rooted in white supremacy and how it has so deeply impacted Black and brown folks for so long, and the racist roots of it, right? And so, yeah, I think that defunding the police is an excellent idea. Unfortunately, it is so highly politicized that there's tactics to it, right? And so what we know, and what I don't know exactly what's happening in Madison. I wish I did and was more privy to what's going on exactly around defunding the police. But I think it's kind of the assumption that you can make is that there's going to be, it's going to be a politicized thing. So let's say that we vote to take money away from the police budget. Well, who do we think will be the first folks that they disinvest from that are part of the police entity? It's going to be the neighborhood officers who have the deepest connection to the community. And when you take away those neighborhood officers, you're going to lose that connection. And folks are going to say, well, where is the police presence when anything happens, or what, what I'm saying? Like, it's going to be a thing where they feel like, oh, see, you took away the police and now look what happens. And, right. So it's a tactic on their end that they will use when things are defunded. And I think that we have to realize that there is going to be, there's going to be tactics on the side of the police, and we have to be able to say, we have the tools. We have the decolonization tools. We have the abolitionist tools. You need to trust the community to be able to say, okay, we defunded the police. And so now we're going to take everything that we know and we're going to reinvest in the community. And in all the work that I do, just like Joe said, we could use all of that money. Like, I am in economic development, and I know that the business incubators that we run have historically been very white. And I love the businesses that we have. They are amazing folks, but yet we need to diversify them. We know that like venture capitalism is very racist. We know that Black women are like the least invested in terms of small businesses, right? We know that we need to have funding for folks that have capital to be able to build wealth. We know that all of these things are not happening in our community. And so I trust folks, like Freedom Inc., Urban Triage, our more radical folks out in Madison to be able to, take what they know and use those funds with whatever needs to happen, right? So yeah, I'm all about it. I'm not like, whoa, what's gonna happen? More crime, like that's just simply not true. And we have to know that there will be tactics from the other side to make us believe, right? Kind of like the fear mongering type thing that will happen of like, oh, well, when you take away police, this is what's going to happen. So, I mean, it's already happening. So
I just want to touch sort of like follow up with what Megan said, because MaDee, you might not have the background info, and I want to like talk about like when the rubber actually meets the road and violence actually does happen.
Yes, please.
So that phenomenon of what you're talking about is, it's actually playing out right now. In that there, over the weekend, there have been incidences of violence, and, the response has been, and I'm not saying it's a malicious response, but it's, we have a lot of our people downtown right now. So, we can't respond as quickly to this incident in your neighborhood. And that's scary as shit. Because, when there are people that actually have guns out, for a community to be able to have to manage that takes a lot of thought, and it takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of knowledge. It takes a lot of connection in the community. So, I rely a lot on people that I know that do this work every day. And I just want to like point out, like Dave, I don't know if you could talk about, your role prior to your current role at Milwaukee County, but if you could talk a little bit about the Office of Violence Prevention and like what you all did to reduce violence in the city of Milwaukee.
Sure. So, for 3 years, we had a significant reduction in homicides and non-fatal shootings in some of the highest impacted neighborhoods. A lot can be said about who's to thank for that. Some people would thank the medical industry for saving people who have been shot. I think that there's plenty to be said about organizations and neighborhood capacity, where you have people at the grassroots level who, like you all described, who took control of their own environments, built relationships, and stood in the gap where those who were paid and resourced heavily to do it did not do the job. I mean, I can't think of too many other professions where you could lose and fail annually and get such a significant increase in the budget. But I'll say this. The power is in neighborhood development. The power is in organizing capacity. The power is in, I would say, looking at what the needs are, which is housing, which is substance abuse prevention and violence prevention and conflict resolution. I will say this: COVID-19 has taught us all something significant about this question that's being asked about the role of law enforcement and other institutions. It has taught us that regardless of what happens, there are some classes of people who will always have health care, some classes of people who will always have some type of high quality education for their children, probably virtual. All right. Those same types of folks will always have the protection of law enforcement. All right. And when you drive in certain neighborhoods, you don't see the same type of police presence in those neighborhoods that you see in the central city or in the inner city or in some of those neighborhoods that are most impacted. I believe that just like those classes of people who have control over their institutions, we should have control over our institutions. We should have control over our schools, over how our safety is protected and how that manifests and who does it, because some people should not be in our community. And you've seen in the news reports about many people saying, well, if we can't do this type of hold or knee to neck type situation that they learn to oppress people, then they quit. Well, good. They should. And I think ultimately we are looking at a time where many of us, like you mentioned, Joe and Megan, we're going to have to step up, police ourselves, educate ourselves, and heal ourselves. And we absolutely have every right to the resources to do it, since those empowered to will not.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that the response in Madison has been where organizations will show up and they, they will talk to folks after an incident, and there are social workers, counselors, other folks available to talk to children who may have seen violence, who may have experienced violence. That there's people who are not armed police who are a very racist entity coming to show up. The police are a reactive entity. And I feel like, someone that I really, really admire who is running for state senate, Nada, in District 26. So if you're in District 26, anyone watching, vote for Nada. But anyway, she says, we don't need permission to heal our community. I do not need permission anymore to heal my own community. Stop making me feel like I have to ask please for everything, and being the tokenized, Black or brown person in every situation. Like it is absolutely ridiculous. And especially in Madison, just growing up here, seeing how everything is so highly politicized. And, I think we are now saying no more, we're not going to ask you for permission. We're not going to put our hands out and be like, oh, please, can we have this little bit of scraps that you want to give us? It's like, no, we know what we need to heal our community. We are no longer asking permission, and we're just going to do it. And the way I feel like we have to have a united message, right? We have to have a message saying that Black lives matter. Black trans lives matter, Black women matter, right? And that is how we as Latinos begin. We can't just say, when we say Black lives matter, that means that we don't think, Latino lives matter. And that's kind of the thing that I keep hearing for folks who are a little more conservative, right? And so it's like, no, we're trying to dismantle the system. To begin to do that is for you to just be able to say that and say that comfortably and say that to everyone. Right. And be able to, stand up against systems that are racist, right? And so that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know.
No, for sure. So before we wrap up, do you guys? I know you guys were hosting view parties. Did you guys have any questions or comments from your fans or friends or anything?
Oh, I got fans.
Of course you do, girl. They're asking any questions. I don't have any.
Y'all ask some questions. I don't have any. Well, not on my watch party.
Right. So viewers, please we welcome you for any questions or comments that you may have on today's podcast. Again, with Megan Diaz-Ricks and David Muhammed and Joe Maldonado. We want to thank you so much for joining us. So yeah, I guess right now we can do like any last thought you want our viewers to take away from this. Viewers want to know about her being a mom. Okay, so I guess we got a question actually for Megan. How has it been, how being a Latina woman married to a Black man, what are your challenges in being a parent or a mother to a Black son?
Ooh, yeah. So, you know, it's something that, and you know, my journey should have started before having a Black son, right? But that's, you know, when I started seeing the horrific things that were happening to Black folks around me when I had my son, it was like, you have to be able to know that my identity has many privileges and my son's identity is different from mine, right? And so I have to make sure that I'm always saying, you know, Black Lives Matter, that I'm talking about anti-Blackness, because, you know, just because of white supremacy, right? And what David talked so amazingly about, like, we have to dismantle that system, and it's rooted in everything. And so for me, you know, I lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for 2 years. And so my son was only 6 weeks old when we moved there. And the horrific treatment that I saw of Black folks in that city made me say, you know, what made me had to have a conversation with myself, like, what can I do? I have a Black son in a very, very racist city, Baton Rouge, that is extremely segregated, and extremely inequitable. And all the representation, most of the representation were white folks, which baffled me, right? I mean, Baton Rouge is a predominantly Black city, but the people making decisions for all the folks in that city were white folks and people who had power and wealth. And so for me, I think you know, and also my son is on the autism spectrum. So he is Black, he has a disability, and he's growing up, you know, in a world where I saw that folks did not value him. And so for me, you know, you have to make sure that and you also have to know that just because you are married, sleeping with, having a partnership, have a Black son, have a Black daughter, does not mean you can't be racist. Let's get that straight. You know, just because your partner or however you know, does not mean that you can't, you know, you cannot be anti-Black.
It does not use the N-word.
Yeah.
For sure.
Exactly. For sure. You have to make sure that you always have that in your mind. And so for me, I knew that I had to confront the anti-Blackness that I was seeing, and that I had to unlearn a lot of things and learn what is decolonization, right? You know, for me, I didn't know that word till I went back to college. And I wish that they taught those things in schools, right? You know, I wish that I would have known all of these things about my identity and how complex it is as a Chicana, you know, as someone who heard a lot of anti-Black things growing up. You know, now I have a Black son. All I know right now is that I need to make sure that I am confronting, unlearning, decolonizing everything that I had known before, right? For him to make this better. And the way that I decided to do that was I want to eventually be in an elected capacity one day, so that the decisions that are being made are ones, you know, where I'm taking into consideration his identity. So that's kind of where I am. But it is a very, very complex thing. And it's something that you have to confront every day, right? And, you know, and you have to know that you can't, and also when you have a black partner and a Black child, you can't always ask them to unpack or, you know, talk about those things in the moment. Like when George Floyd happened, you know, my husband was so deeply impacted and tired of seeing Black men, Black women being murdered on TV in front of him all the time. And so, but I'm not going to be like, let's talk about it. You know, it's like, make sure that you're also giving time to heal, and that you're not forcing your partner to confront that just because you want to talk about it, right? Well, I really want to talk about what happened, and, you know, but it's like, we need to give folks time to heal, and we need to make sure that we are supportive partners as well, because, you know, that's, you know, I'm not seeing that, right? He is seeing folks that look like him you know, all the time being murdered and nothing being done about it, right? So that's, you know, it's hard though. It's tough.
For sure, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing, Megan. Any last thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, I mean it's complex. It's evolving every day, and I think you know, I'm going to take like Megan's advice. I try to listen these days more than I talk, and anybody that knows me that that's really hard. But I'm always trying to learn, and I'm always trying to understand like the nuance of situations. Race is one of them. I think, you know, we're a people who are made up of a lot of different things. So it's often a little bit more fluid in Latin America than it is in the United States. And somebody could be, you know, the color of Sammy Sosa pre skin cream, and be, you know, and be like anti-black too, and you know, but most of us have some sort of indigenous or African ancestry in us. So when we are doing things that are anti-black, we're sort of doing things against our own selves and against our grandmothers. So, you know, it's really important to like understand that complexity and all those subtleties in ourselves, and understand like how and why we've been colonized.
Right on. David, did you have any last comments?
Yeah. I would say that, you know, we're moving out of a black and white paradigm in this country, and I think that's important. I think we represent a lot of that. That doesn't mean erasure, but it definitely means that we have to be about the business of knowledge of self, of each one teach one, of educating our young people, because it's really when we teach our children about the reality that they're going to confront as black and brown youth, that's what makes them more resilient to a hostile environment. They have to know that, and we have to create space for them to stumble and get that information, and at the same time have patience with our people who are waking up from 500 years of straight ignorance. And we have to have the courage to teach and recognize that this is a process, but it's being expedited by, I'd say, that the forces of this of a nation that's unraveling. You see that at the White House. You see the leadership, the misleadership at the top, where there is no refuge for us. And many of us who came here thinking that this was a better environment didn't realize that the places we left, they were in that condition because of policies made from this country. And so we have to keep that connection to where we come from, to our homeland, to our people, to the Spanish language, quite honestly, even though it's the language of our colonizer and conquistador, it's a language that unites us and helps us reach 22 nations on the planet. And we need that because we're going to need each other for the times that are ahead, particularly what we've seen in 2020. So.
Right. All right, everyone. Well, I want to thank you guys personally so much. Megan, Diaz-Ricks, David, Muhammed, and Joe Maldonado. Thank you guys so much for doing this with me. You know, the Latin TalkBacks, the anti-blackness in our community. I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners. Please, if you have any questions or comments, post. We will definitely answer you or get back to you. But please share this video widely, and we hope that you guys will join us next time on Wisconsin Mujeres, the Latinx TalkBack, the anti-blackness in our community. You guys have a good night, okay? Good night.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.